Good afternoon. Let's start by just quickly checking in, see how people are doing. It's lovely to be the end of the week here, I have to say. I don't know how you guys are at your institutions. We have had the swath of issues that I have read about happening elsewhere where people just aren't doing school as seriously as they used to, or the ramifications of 2 years of being on an unconventional environment and trying to snap back to normal. So we are certainly knee deep in that right now. So I think that's about where I am. Stephanie, how are you doing in this lovely day?
Yeah. I feel the same way. This morning I taught metabolism, which I try to be like super jazzed about because people like hear the word metabolism and immediately like roll their eyes.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And like I did that as an undergrad. I can't blame them. Like I feel the same way, but I'm like,
Yeah.
metabolism, and they're like, and so yeah. Similar, but happy it's Friday.
Exactly. And then we have Dominique. How are you doing?
Good. So I'm working at two different institutions right now as an adjunct, and one of them, the struggle is real when it comes to trying to get the incoming freshmen to do anything with chemistry at any level. It's absolutely amazing the level of knowledge that they're at currently. And then I'm dealing with juniors over in another program, and they've learned their anatomy and physiology online. So going to neuro, they have no idea what's going on. So it's been a fun semester.
So just listening to what you're saying there, what is you've got some general chemistry classes, but then also some advanced stuff that's more molecular. Am I getting that right?
It's neuro. So it's neuroanatomy, a lot of structure and function and how everything works together.
Oh yeah, well that'll do it.
Yeah.
So this particular paper, let me go ahead and screen share it. We actually had a really good 3-person conversation the other day about this, so we'll see how we do today. This paper gets really in detail to the idea of buy-in and what one needs to do to attain it. And there's 2 parts to this. There's the idea of how you feel about the model that's in here. And then I think equally as valuable a discussion point, at least the other day, was the idea of how one actually accomplishes the individual components that are listed in here. And so when I did this the other day, I was sort of prepared to just blow right past to the other part, but then we actually ended up having a discussion about the methodologies, like the way that this was put together, and if you accept this model as it's put together. So as a summary here, the original work on this, or the groundwork on this, was from a single classroom, a large classroom. And so this is a follow-up. David Hanauer, Mark Graham, you're looking at some pretty big names in assessment here, trying to look at what we can do to take a whole bunch of data, in this case, lots of different institutions, 14 faculty members, so different varieties of classes, and coming to this here as a model for developing effective STEM coursework, your simple 4-step process, right? Just develop trust and a growth mindset, right? Super simple. And so can I get the trust of my students? Can I develop a growth mindset in them? Can I get effective buy-in? And you see here a 3-step process as to what buy-in would look like. And then can I develop engagement? And you see here the sequence in which it's purportedly most effective in doing this. And then you come out the other side and you get the twin goals of both increased persistence in the coursework and effective grades. And when you come down here, you get some of the statistical work, the modeling that they did, which gives them confidence that this model is accurate. When we discussed this the other day, there was some pushback on the idea of not the importance of trust, but what trust actually meant in the context of what was collected here. And so I think I'd like to approach this sort of in a similar fashion, looking at these 4 steps and asking you, one, how you feel they are situated with respect to this model, but then also what, if anything, do you do to try to attain these particular things in your own particular classes? So first on their list is the idea of trust. And if we go back up to their methodology, and now I need to be able to find it. Current study, right here. So how they actually define, students' levels of trust in their instructors were assessed using a 9-item measure assessing 3 components of trust: understanding, acceptance, and care. My instructor gets me. My instructor accepts me for who I am. We talked a lot about that idea, my instructor gets me, what that means and what the importance of it is. So I'd like to start then with your guys' assessments on this idea of trust. Do you value it? How do you do to get it, etc.? So who would like to lead us off?
I guess I'll start.
Please, thank you.
So I start almost every class talking about Angela Duckworth's idea of grit and growth mindset, because you don't always have to be the smartest, you just have to be the most persistent. And those are the ones that generally do better in life in the long run. And I always start off being like, I'm not perfect. I got a 50 on my Calc 2 final when I was an undergrad. So I understand what it means like to fail and just absolutely freak out when you get a bad grade. But hey, now I have a PhD in chemistry and we use a lot of math. So it's not the end of the world if you fail something. And I basically start at their level being like, hey, I understand that it's really hard. So that's where I start.
I like that sort of, defining or reminding students that you are a human being, right? And humans make mistakes and that we're not these all-knowing automatons. So I think that sounds like a really effective way to sort of engender, I'm not trying to work against you here, right? So Stephanie, how about you?
Yeah, I think that's, I try to do some similar things. Like when we talk about metabolism, just because it's fresh on my mind, I remind them of undergrad. Like
that's one of the hardest things to have to teach. So whatever you can suggest, I will take it.
Right. And I do like repetition and drawing and all of these different things to like show it in many different ways. But like I also remind them, I'm like, okay, so today we're going to talk about this, and like I know how you feel. I felt the same way, and like I feel differently about it now, but because I've done it so many times, and I find that it's like actually like a systematic process. And so like I enjoy that aspect, but as an undergrad I didn't see that and I did not enjoy it. And so trying to identify with them. But I would say in general, if you think about instructor trust, I think a lot of times there's not a lot of thought put into that. Like it's like, of course they trust you, you have your PhD. And that's not the approach that I try to take, but I think like traditionally it's just been like, why would they not trust me? And it's not about, it's about knowledge based and not like similarities, or I'm trying to think of the right word, but it's not about empathy. It's about like knowledge content.
Yeah. And when we were talking about this the other day, this idea of my instructor, quote unquote, getting me, like this idea of, yeah, we wish to be compassionate, but we're not looking to be your friend in terms of developing trust. And so trust in the sense of, I can get you where you want to go. Like, I know what I'm doing. That sort of thing is probably what we're looking at here. So Cindy joins us. Cindy, if you'd like to briefly just check in with us on how things are going.
Hi, everyone. Everything is going well so far. So I've been working on integrating the active learning techniques into 2 different classes at 2 different levels. So I have
It sounds like an experiment right out of the gate. That's awesome.
It is. Yeah. It really is.
Yeah.
So I have an intro to bio course, freshman, right out of high school. Nice. And so for them, it was especially important. But I also teach a genetics course to sophomores. And so for the genetics course, even though the students are a little bit more advanced, everyone hates genetics. I think everyone except me and other people with PhDs
Yeah,
in
but
genetics.
I teach that too, so I disagree. But yeah, most people do. You're right.
Most people are terrified of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of the big issues with that particular course is the fact that everything is just on paper usually.
Mhm.
But I feel like if students get their hands dirty and they're practicing, they're working through pedigrees and they're working through crosses, everything becomes a little bit easier and what we say on paper starts to make sense. So the active learning has really been helping. We just did an exam and the average is in the 80%.
Nice.
So it's way up there. And when I taught the course previously, I did not have that. So I think not only am I
decidedly not 80, yes.
Yes, I have not only been able to incorporate the active learning, but I can see already that it's helping them. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
Can I ask what particular techniques you've actually used?
Yes, so we have been doing a lot of worksheets and group work.
Mhm.
So every lecture has lots of practice problems included, and I do them as both in-class activities where they either get into groups or we do them individually and then they talk about it as a big group, or I have them work on it separately and then we talk about it.
Mhm.
In addition to that, I've done some reflective writing. So the other thing about genetics are the terms. It's easy to mix up sister chromatids, centromeres, chromosomes, and all the other C's involved. And so having them reflect on where each of those fit has been really helpful to my students. And we've done some gallery walks as well, where we go through the processes and think about how things fit together within that process. And that's been pretty helpful.
So what would you say then, because we were just talking about establishing trust with your students, what have you done that has been effective in getting the students to sort of trust your methodology, that all this work you're having them do is worth it?
Yeah, so that's always the catch, right? You
Yeah.
spend all this time on the syllabus and the structure, and now you have to get student buy-in.
Exactly.
I spend the first class explaining what we'd be doing and why. I told them about my experiences teaching the course and the outcomes and what I thought the fix would be. And then the steps that I've made personally to make sure that I learn all of the things that I can do to help them. So I've mentioned that, I'm now a POM fellow. What that means is I'm literally learning these techniques that I can use to help you guys.
Nice.
And so we're going to do these techniques because they've been shown. There are publications that show that this type of learning actually works. So that's what we're doing. And they seem to be okay with it. I also made sure that they understood that I am not grading them, not all the time, based on what the outcome is. I don't care if you get all of these practice problems right. I want you to go through the motions. I want you to try it. So it's a safe space. Give it a shot. Don't start every sentence with "this might be wrong," but they tend to be a little bit the self-defeating type attitude. So we've talked about getting over that as well. And they just understand that I'm on their side. We're a team and we're going to do this together. I've done my part and now I'm bringing it to you guys. And I hope that you will join in for your benefit. And it seems to have worked. They're cool with it. They love the cold calling. They now laugh when I call on them if they don't know the answer, but I haven't had any complaints so far.
So it sounds like the fine-tuned stuff that you've done there sounds like that they feel safe in that environment. Like it's okay to be maybe publicly wrong, which is a big thing to get over. So that's awesome.
Yeah. So I cheated a little bit. So I have a 6-year-old daughter that goes to a Montessori school.
Yeah.
And elementary, she just started first grade, and they are the ones that I learned this from, because I would look at the way her teacher would interact with them and the things she would say. She's like, "Oh, I think I got this wrong, but now I understand. Now I get it. So I won't make that mistake again." So she understands the value of failure. It's not just something to get down on yourself about, but there's a huge learning opportunity built into failure, right? Because you know where you went wrong, you understand what it should be, you're probably never going to make that mistake again. So I tell them, come to class, let's make all of the mistakes here with these problems so that when you get to my exam, it's easy.
Well, thank you.
And that seems to work. Yeah.
Thank you for all that. And that is super exciting. Like, it sounds like you're getting dividends here, which sometimes it takes longer than others. So it sounds like it's going really well for you. So congratulations on that.
So far, thank you. I'll try not to jinx it, but
yeah,
so far,
exactly,
so
right? Let's go ahead and look at the next part of this, which would be this 3-part notion. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. The growth mindset, because this is the one that I was actually most interested in getting other people's thoughts on, simply because it's not something that I had ever actively gone into a class and said, hey, kid, let's talk about growth mindset, right? Just the idea of what one can do to get your students in a good frame of mind for the types of things that you intend to do in the class. And Cindy, I think you actually alluded to that already with your analogy with your daughter about like being okay to fail. So that mindset would suggest that your students understand that it's not like some of us have it, some of us don't, like that we believe that everyone has a chance to succeed here, but you have to have that sort of attitude, that willingness to be able to, first of all, expose yourself a little bit, but also to develop and learn as you go. So I'm wondering if anyone here does a more deliberate approach here to growth mindset. And if you do, what is it that you do to get your students into this frame of mind?
I'm not sure that like I do this terribly well. And I have not started teaching the new class that I redesigned, which I'm hoping I can implement some of these things. But I give quizzes and I allow them to take them as many times as possible. And so sometimes that just turns into them like figuring out what's right and then like going back and taking it enough so they get all the right things. But I'm like, the point of the quiz is to evaluate where you're at so you can figure out where you need to go. But maybe if I like more specifically was like, you can get better. Like the point of the quiz is to see your improvement and really emphasize growth mindset like explicitly and not just be like, you can try as many times as you want, no penalty, and but like really be like, track your progress. Like don't, like if you don't do well, go back and study, see how much better you did, and maybe be explicit like this is for so that you can see your growth and do well.
That's the second time we've heard the connection to assessment here, right? That one of the difficult things sometimes with an active learning based class, or when you're trying to do an authentic research experience in your laboratory, is how do you grade it? How do you provide evaluation that is accurate, but at the same time not discouraging? And so I've heard people do that before, and it generally is received well. The idea that you are using a formative piece of assessment like you are, yeah, it's part of your grade, but it's also designed to help you improve. I mean, I've learned as of late to give my students, especially at the introductory level, revision opportunities on their writing. I mean, I find that to be super important because we regularly complain about their lab reports, but we need to give them the chance to improve their lab reports, right? Let me check it. Oh, and he's unmiked anyway. So Sabyasachi, how you doing?
Hello, hi. Sorry I'm late. I was at another meeting, and
coming back for everyone. No worries.
Yeah. So coming back to the question, I think, and in fact, that is what we were discussing in the previous meeting. Mm-hmm. It's the renal system course, which is starting in about some month time. So the quizzes, we're having quizzes, and instead of just being a formative, we are keeping them really low stake, 0.1% of the grade.
Nice.
So it's 0.1%. So it is not overwhelming for the students. If they choose not to do that for whatever reason, they are just losing 0.1%.
There's that bizarre psychological thing where if it's worth a point, they will absolutely like bust.
Yeah. But if they do it and they don't do well, so that is like right. Encouraging. They know they can discuss the quiz and it's not like 40% of the grade or even 5% of the grade. 0.1%. It's insignificant, but still it is important.
Yep.
That helps them to understand where they're going wrong and the opportunity of making improvement for the next quiz. So we have these course, I'm teaching in a med school. We have these very short courses. We are really intensive, 1 month long. So the renal course will start in the first week of December. Then they have the midterm in 2 weeks. On 17th of December, they have the midterm. Then they have 2 or 3 weeks off as the holidays. Then we start again on 3rd of January, and they finish, I believe, 16th or 17th of January. So in between, they have this 9. Yeah, so it's short. And in they have this 9, what we call a renal pursuit, where they solve questions in groups. So we have 120 students. We have like 18 to 20 groups, 6, 7 students. So they do that we have preparatory material to come to these sessions. They have to do these quizzes, which is 0.1% of the grade. So that's what. And they can ask questions during the session, and how improvement can be done. They can do that.
And it's interesting because you, whenever you come to these sessions, because you bring a medical school perspective to this,
Yeah.
but the attitudes are still the same. That we want people to believe that they can do it, and so the ability to improve, the ability to get people in a frame of mind that they will improve over time. Those sort of approaches certainly seem to be effective. That's very cool.
And it's give them the opportunity to look back what they're not doing right. Suppose somebody gets like 9 out of 10 in the quiz, so they are doing pretty okay, but somebody gets like 2 out of 10 in spite of studying the material, then they have the opportunity of rethink what they can do differently, or we have learning specialists. They can get additional help from coaching facilities, or talk to their facilitators and the faculty. Those things.
Thank you for that. Anyone else on this idea of growth mindset?
So one of the things that I do is I give a quiz weekly to kind of force the students to study, and each quiz is worth 10 points instead of
I was resistant to that, and it's totally something I do too. Yeah, it really does work.
Yeah, and what I do is, at least for when I was teaching organic chemistry last year, I told them that the question on each quiz that everyone got the most wrong will be seen again on the final exam.
I like that.
So I won't tell them which one they got wrong the most, but
I like that. I like that a
if
lot.
they start talking with each other to figure out, okay, so I got this one, I got this one, and they might be able to figure out which one it is. So they will have to go back, study, and actually learn to talk with other people in the classroom instead of just kind of sitting back and being like, okay, I'm going to just talk with my one friend right here.
But regardless, they have to go back and like study all the quizzes and know that I like that a lot. I might steal that. That's very clever. So I love all of these ideas, because it's not so much taking a bunch of time in the first class to say, hey kids, let's talk about growth mindset, but it's also just establishing that attitude or idea that not failure, but like not knowing is certainly an option that you should not be afraid of, and that you should expect to develop as you go through the class. And it's okay if you don't know everything, even at the end, right? So these are excellent suggestions. Thank you for those. All right. The 3 steps for buy-in, right? How simple is this? Just persuade, identify, and commit. And so this paper is largely built on this buy-in portion of the program. And when you take your class and start to convert it into this active learning format, historically, and you guys have probably seen this for yourselves, the hard part is to get your students to understand that you are not just not feeling like working today, right? That you are doing something that is proven, you are doing something that is high impact, but may involve them being more involved or more directly participating in their own education, to put it that way. And so there's the persuasion part here, but then like just getting people to understand what the point of everything you're doing is. So what would you guys suggest as your buy-in strategies work in your classes. And I actually, let me pick on Cindy first, because I'm curious, given that you're looking at this at multiple levels simultaneously, if the buy-in looks different between one class and the other. You're muted. There you go.
There we go. I think it is different. The freshmen are a little bit more resistant, I've found. And it's probably because they're being asked to do something that they have not been asked to do in the past. So it's brand new to them. So I feel like I've had to work a little bit more. And there are still maybe one or two students who are quite resistant to it. I think a lot of it has to do with their own confidence. They're younger students. They're not so willing to be vulnerable in front of everyone. Yeah. So have everyone know that you don't know what meiosis is or whatever the problem is. For the genetics students who are sophomores, they don't care. They're happy to come up to the board and write out the cross incorrectly, but then work with their classmates to figure it out. So I think my approach is slightly different. I am a lot more gentle with the freshman students, trying to persuade them that this is okay. It is all right to be wrong. You're not being judged at all by anyone. And I tell them about myself. I say, you know, when I was a freshman, it was difficult. I didn't know all of this stuff, but because I've been doing it consistently, I've committed to learning all of this information and I've been focused on learning it, that over a period of time, I remember and I understand. So I think using myself as an example or using other success stories from other students that I've had has worked a bit more with them. But the other students, they've been fine, I think, from the very beginning.
Interesting. Dominique, I think you have a couple different environments as well. Do you have a more uniform style or do you have to vary it up?
It definitely depends on which school I'm at.
Yeah.
When I'm at the community college, it's more of a, okay, guys, let's work on this together. I do a lot more think, pair, share, trying to do small group work to get them more comfortable, because I have two kids that are just like, I don't know what's going on, and the rest are just sitting there. So if I can get them to talk a little bit, it works really well. At the private school that I work at, they are a lot more open. So I get to know them on a personal level. Like I was talking with one of my students yesterday. I was like, listen, the only two things that I really know about you are that you have cows at home and that you've had a cough since the first day of class and it won't go away. What else should I know about you? He's like, actually, that's pretty much it. Like, that's not helpful, man. So I try to get them laughing and stuff, at least in the lab setting. So it works out well.
Are there other, since you mentioned the community college background, are there other demographic differences that play in there too? Like average age, things like that?
The average age with one of my classes at the community college, they're all around 18, 19. And that's pretty much the same for the private college for that introductory chem class. But for my other one, I have a range from younger than me by a couple of years to 10, 15 years older than me. And when I'm just like, hey guys, how are your kids doing? And I try to just like bring back what they're talking about to be like, okay, she actually does care about me. And if she cares about me, I might work a little bit harder.
That's certainly, I mean, that actually goes back to the trust aspect of it, but like trust and buy-in are certainly intimately related here. So that would make sense. Does anyone do a flipped classroom approach or anything that involves watching a lot of videos than doing something more activity-based?
Yeah,
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, we do flipped classroom. A few sessions, not the entire course, but a few sessions we do flipped classroom.
I ask because I think historically buy-in sometimes is the hardest for something like that, because on its surface, it's just like, wait a minute, like why are you sort of passing this all off to me and then you don't have to do anything? I'm curious if you guys had any pushback or issues with the flipped classroom approach, or if there are any strategies you've used to combat that. So maybe Sabiachi and then Cindy.
Yeah, well, the same thing, the renal course I'm talking about, the overall, we have never got really good grades in that, like the student, the course grade, because first they're mandatory sessions and they have to show up at 8 in the morning.
Okay.
So the students don't like typically to show up at 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
They're mandatory. And
So
again,
you're already fighting an uphill battle. Yeah.
yeah, and we get this comment sometimes, like we are like paying so many thousands of dollars, and here we have to do ourselves, and nobody's there teaching us. So we have prepared all the guys, and we're there to guide them. They don't.
course.
But yeah, but the other course we just got over today, the endocrine system course, where the students love it. It's a flipped classroom where there's a patient, the real patients come, and they have to do some pre-work, and then they can ask questions to the patient, and then they have interactive activity, the working groups. But that they love because they are interacting with real patients, and it is a live environment where they can see and talk to the patient, and they can see the patient scenario. Like we had some, like this patient, she always amazing. She's a type 1 diabetes patient, and she used to be a model in some like big magazine. And when you're modeling, they traditionally want the models to be thin. And when she was taking insulin, because the insulin you put on weight, and so the modeling industry did not like that. And so she was just having only enough insulin so that she was still looking good. And that caused a lot of diabetic complication. So that's amazing. And the students will always remember that for the rest of their life, this particular patient. And so we have patients like that. And those they love. Those are all flipped classroom, but some they don't like the renal one I was talking about.
Wow. Thank you for that. And Cindy, how about you?
So I do partially flipped for my introductory biology course. That one, it's still somewhat of an uphill battle. I'm trying to get students to understand why I'm doing it. So why is it necessary and how they can use it to their own benefit. So what I do is pre-record lectures, make them available on Blackboard, which is our learning platform, and they're required to watch them before class. They don't have to answer any questions or anything like that, just watch it. I think part of the issue for the freshman students is that they're still having trouble managing their time. And so carving out time to look at the videos where they're focused and not just listening to it in the background has been troublesome for some of them. But once I have explained, we only have this amount of time for class, and these are the things I'd like to do when we're in class, because they love the active learning activities. But I've explained that, you guys like them, but we need to have the time to do them. And so if you watch the video before you come to class, now you have all of the background information I need you to have so that we can do these activities. They seem to be a little bit more amenable, but I still have to remind them, hey, did you watch the video today? And so on. So there are lots of reminders that go into getting them to do it.
And I'll add to what Cindy just said. We also have sometimes we have videos they have to watch. And I think the trick is the videos or any pre-work should not be too much work. It should not be overwhelming. It should be really short video, just enough.
Short pieces.
Exactly. Just enough information that they can find it useful to do the session. Like previously, what I used to do, I used to think there's some excellent news article or some research article on like whatever, some disorder, I used to post it so the students could read, but they don't really have the time. So instead of that, if I can just post one figure or something which is significant in that manuscript, which might be useful, that is much better than the entire manuscript. So those things.
That's very true. So I've seen a difference in how they feel about an hour-long recording versus a few 10-minute long recordings.
10 minutes, 10 minutes you can do it.
Even if it adds up though. So even if it still adds up to an hour, they're more likely to complete the short ones rather than the one really long one. I guess it's something psychological.
For real. Have you found, especially I guess, Cindy, because you have freshmen, there's always the specter of how COVID has impacted all of this. And if the students are doing what you want them to do. I suppose COVID may have actually inadvertently helped you here. I guess if they're used to watching videos, they're used to being in a more virtual environment. Do you have any evidence that they're, how effective it is that they're actually watching the videos?
No, so I haven't measured them at all because I don't require them to answer any questions based on those videos or anything like that. I've thought about embedding quizzes into them, but I felt like that would create a big fight, and I didn't want to deal with that fight yet.
Yeah,
but
no, I got that.
Yeah, but COVID has been a problem in getting them to come to class and submitting things on time. They're so used to joining class from their bedrooms. Now that they have to show up to an actual building, they're like, oh, I don't know if I can do this.
It's been amazing. I'm teaching a class. This is a class in our college's core curriculum, so nothing to do with science at all, just something very different. But like, I had 6 out of 23 people just, we're not going to write the paper. I'm like, okay, not how I would go, like with my type A personality, but you guys do you. That just seems to be, and I hear stories like that all over the place. So.
Yeah, so I have similar experiences with my students not being able to, I think it's the follow through that's the problem. They're so used to all of the flexibility that was built into COVID and dealing with all of that they now expect it.
Exactly. And we've had those conversations all over the place, right? Like what's going to go away and what's going to become permanent. And it'll be interesting to see if some of that flexibility actually just becomes part of a new normal, or if we do eventually get ourselves back to a more traditional style of teaching things. So I would say the other thing with respect to buy-in, and I think again, buy-in and trust, not interchangeable, but certainly closely related. Just that idea of being very open up front with the class, like, here is what we're doing, here are the objectives. I've seen some people do some really good work in their syllabi, like here are the learning objectives, here's how we're going to do it. It's more work, obviously, to put together, but like it's so clear for your students that like it cleans up a lot of this stuff in advance about like, yeah, this is what it's going to look like, but here's why I'm doing it. And just something simple like that can be super effective in getting your buy-in rates up.
So that is basically backward design, right? So tell them, you just tell them what is expected, and this is.
Like the example I always use in this situation was the first time I tried to do a CRISPR-Cas9 based experiment, and I did a really lousy job on nuts and bolts of CRISPR-Cas9, but did a really good job on the retention, excitement side of the equation. So my learning objectives actually were not aligned properly. So I started one thing and got something else out. And it was my personal lesson about, okay, what am I doing? And is it aligning with what I want them to be doing? And so I learned that the hard way that one time. But then from there, it's been helpful for me as sort of a reminder when I do these designs. All right, engagement. So you do all of this, you have your students in class. Cindy alluded to group work already, but the particular things that you are doing to get your students engaged with the material. Obviously, laboratory stuff is very helpful with engagement. This is always an interesting thing for POM because we leave the laboratory stuff to some other groups, some other people, and we focus on the active learning and the classroom part of it. But there are several really cool models where you blend the two together that like it's almost very difficult to find where the lecture part of your class ends and the lab part begins, right? So things you can do just to get your students active and engaged in the class. Making them do things in an iterative manner so they're getting to practice. They are, and we've talked about this, right, that they are able to try something, maybe fail at something and improve on it. But when you see that written there, just the idea of student engagement, what are your preferred techniques? How do you promote and attain, you think, engagement of your students?
Could you give an example what you do? Maybe we can.
Yeah, I was
could-
about 3 seconds away from that anyway. So if I am doing talking about a piece of primary literature, how do I break that piece of literature apart to enable my students to be able to better understand what the paper's about and how to absorb the complexities of something like that? And so can I, we mentioned worksheets already, right? Can I do a worksheet-based approach where certain people do certain figures and concentrate on understanding what's going on and what the take-home message of the figure is, and the students then engage in some level of peer instruction where the people who did figure 1 teach the people who did figure 2 and vice versa. I'm obviously there to help as well, but people are not only involved in learning, but also involved in the teaching part of it, in helping other people understand something that they specialized in, right, as they're going through and studying. So that's something that I would do just to mix things up a bit and make sure that the whole class isn't just me talking at them.
Well, one thing that we do that's for a different course is called Physiology and Immunology. That's a graduate course for the PhD students. And one of the requirements for the course is presenting 1 or 2 articles from primary literature, and that's 30% of the grade. So previously what used to happen, you can select a paper from physiology or immunology and you present it. But now we did, like last year, and it was very successful. There were only 4 students in the course. So they presented two papers, 1 on physiology, 1 in immunology. So every paper, all the 4 students, they participated. Like one student did the introduction, the other did the methods, results. So as a result, everybody was involved in understanding the manuscript. Otherwise, what happens if like 4 students, they are presenting 4 different manuscripts, then the other students, they are totally detached from what's happening in the manuscript. They are not participating here. Everybody's involved, and I think the outcome was much better.
Thank you for that. So other approaches people have used. Stephanie.
If I'm understanding correctly, I feel like clicker questions are breaking up the class into like open-ended. So how did we get there? How do we know that? Like, what if, what if a poison toxins, or what if a toxin inhibits the activity of like cytochrome C oxidase? Like, what happens, right? So like now that you know the basic concept, like what's going on?
Yeah, like synthesis style stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
So like if you know the basic content, and then like waiting for them to answer, which is like sometimes really difficult when you don't have good buy-in and you're just like, come on, you can do it, come on, and like trying not to answer it for them. And so like clicker questions, or just like pausing to ask questions. But then I also do disease presentations, so kind of like what you're saying, but throughout. So I teach a microbiology course, and lots of students, and I teach specifically for pre-nursing, the class that I'll be teaching in the spring. And so they don't see, hopefully by the end of the class they see this, but they often are like, why do we care about microbiology? But when I'm like, let's talk about cholera, they're like, yeah, that's what I came here for, right? And so hopefully by the end they feel somewhat differently. But so I have like a whole list of diseases, and they pick theirs. And so every class starts out with disease presentations. And so you're hearing from the students at the beginning of every class, which kind of, I'm hoping, helps get them excited about what we're doing. And I intentionally pick the diseases and schedule them on days where the content somewhat aligns. And so if they don't make the connection between what we're going through, I can come up and be like, yeah, that was really interesting. Like, what a great point. You see how the structure is really important for the disease, and try to like connect it. And so they hear not just from me, but from the students, and the students, hopefully, although that's not always true, bring excitement about whatever they've selected or picked, or some sort of connection.
I'm doing
like
something similar to that actually too. My neuroscience class is mostly occupational therapy majors.
Hmm.
So their end of the year project for the lab is actually give a presentation on one of the 50 diseases that I chose for them, but also make a brochure that they would give out to one of their patients if one of their patients actually had the neurological disease that they actually chose. So I'm glad that we're actually doing something very similar.
Yeah, so my techniques are very similar to most of what you guys just said. So it looks a little different between the two courses. So for my first years, I like to have them act things out, or like they would pretend to be homologous chromosomes or pretend to be sister chromatids and walk through mitosis or meiosis. You know, what's happening, where are you going, who are you with, etc. We do that for things like cell signaling as well, because that's easy to do cell communication if we're looking at long distance versus local communication, so they can act all of that out pretty easily. But for the genetics students, I usually embed problem questions after a set number of slides. So we pause and we attempt a problem together and we talk about it. And then we continue with me talking. They have not been a very quiet class, so they're quite rowdy, and I like that. So they're always very ready to engage and to ask questions. So I haven't had any issues with engagement with that said, but for the freshmen, it took some warming up. You know, they're now at college for the first time, and I guess that's part of the reason. But I find acting things out and making it fun for them seems to work best, along with the concept questions that are embedded in our lectures.
So let me ask you then about the overall composite model here. So you've got, here's the final stats if you'd like to digest these. The packets you see there, I did go and try to learn a little more about that. So they have all these different instruments that they're using to assess each different step here. And they have so many variables that go in here. What they did was they took all the variables, put them into random buckets, if you will. And that's what those individual packets are, attached to trust and growth mindset and buy-in, et cetera. So that's where all the extra boxes are. But what you have here is a model that they've gone through and statistically verified based on their own methodologies. And based on everything you've read here and maybe your own personal experiences, does this model make sense to you? Are there ways you would adjust it? Just how overall with this paper, how does it sit with you?
I'm really surprised that trust had a bigger impact than growth mindset. Like I think if you had asked me, like, if the student feel like if the instructor gets me versus I can grow, I would have said they were at least equal.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where we were getting the other day about how one asked about trust in the first place and what were the questions like. But I think it's a really good point, and it begs the question. I've certainly had my share of students that aren't especially interested in a growth mindset, like, which is fine. Like, you can come to my class because you have to be there and you're just going to go through it and get out. Maybe you won't learn anything, and maybe that contributes to that variation. In that case, the more important thing would be that you trust that I'm not going to screw you, as opposed to I think I'm going to get better. But that's, I would think not the people we're most excited about teaching anyway, right? And so that may contribute though to those numbers, just speculating.
I actually wasn't surprised that trust was a bigger factor, just because any of the professors that I thought that actually cared about us and saw us more than just a number or just a person sitting in their classroom, I felt like I tried a little harder. So I'm wondering if that's what it's actually coming into. So the trust is leading to a better growth mindset than them being separate from each other.
Well, and you've got the interchangeability there almost with buy-in, right? That what you're suggesting there is that the trust then feeds into buy-in, which does agree with what they have here model-wise. That's very interesting.
So I actually agree with what Dominique just said, because I literally I'm constantly telling my students that I don't decide what grade they get, but they still they're convinced that I'm the deciding factor.
I didn't
And
give
so
you this, you earned this, that sort of thing.
exactly,
Yeah.
I don't give you grades. I just keep track of them. That's it. But they, regardless of how many times I say that, they believe that the professor is the one who gives them a grade. You gave me an F or you gave me an A. But I feel like once they understand that I am on their side, I'm doing everything that I can to help you, or I want to do everything that I can to help you, they tend to work harder. And I feel like that's probably why trust seems to be more impactful. It's linked to that growth mindset. They work harder when they think you're on their side.
Thank you for that. Very interesting. I mean, looking at this from my own set, the model has some common sense to it. So it certainly makes sense to me in that respect. It's just, it's always very interesting to me as somebody who is not trained in this kind of research to see something like this and to see data attached to it, to see numbers attached to it. It's reassuring, right? That there are ways to verify things that we think we anecdotally know, but there's actually science to back it up. And this paper, I think, does a nice job of doing that and expanding on the ideas of an original, a single classroom coming up with the notions of it. All right. I think that puts us in a good place. As always, if you guys have paper suggestions, I am happy to have them. I had just sent out something from Katie Furness that was a follow-up to the ableism talks that I hope you were able to attend last month. So if you have some other suggestions for us to talk about, I am happy to have them. So please let me know. Otherwise, good luck with your Novembers. I'm happy to have you here in such a busy month of the year. So, and December will be worse, but I hope to see you guys in a few weeks.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Bye.
You.